In our leading story, Transport Minister Barbara Creecy says government is on the journey of assessing the next step in opening up South Africa's rail networks to private investors. And Creecy has outlined plans for private sector participation in passenger rail as part of efforts to fix the country's transport system and also boost economic growth. Now, the minister announced a request for information to invite public views to guide the process. SABC News reporter Nosipho Radebe is there for us and she joins us now. Radebe, a very good afternoon to you. So a lot coming out of that briefing, I suppose, firmly putting a spotlight on private investment within rail services and infrastructure. Briefly take us through the highlights mentioned by the ministers this afternoon.
A very good afternoon to you, Alicia, and to the viewers at home. Of course, as you mentioned, quite a bit coming out of today's briefing with the Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, but just also reaffirming essentially government's or the Transport Department's commitment to the recovery of the passenger rail network in South Africa and, of course, opening up then that recovery to the private sector to help government along that line. But to sort of outline some of the plans that government has, I'm going to turn now to the Minister of Transport, Barbara Creecy. Minister, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You've, of course, outlined government's commitment to the recovery of the passenger rail. Take us through some of the sort of key outlines that you've mentioned today.
Well, today what we're doing is we're launching a request for information from the private sector for innovative ideas and solutions relating to the development of regional rapid rail, a new fare collection system for PRASA, the modernization of our depots and the management of our depots, as well as those who would be interested in leasing our new blue trains and some of our old yellow fleet, and also advising us on what they think could be the long-term future of the Gibela manufacturing plant. You know, this is where we are manufacturing all of PRASA's new blue trains. The African Union took a decision in 2015 that this plant would be the rail manufacturing hub of Africa, and we're interested in expanding the offering of this very important factory, and we want to get ideas and solutions from the private sector. Of course, in the process of upgrading PRASA's signalling network, we're rolling out hundreds of kilometers of fiber. We're interested to hear from the private sector ideas they have around commercialization of this fiber network so that we can get additional sources of income for PRASA itself.
And also, Minister, you also mentioned an update then on the Transnet freight and logistics. What was the work that's being done there? Can you take us through that?
Yes. Well, we launched a similar request for information in March for the freight logistics sector. We received over 163 responses, more than 50 of them from 12 international countries. Of course, it's been a huge volume of information that we've had to work through in partnership with Transnet itself and also the Development Bank of South Africa. And we're now at a stage where Transnet is more or less ready. They're going to issue the first request for proposal, which is the beginning of a formal tendering process before the end of this year, and 3 more in the first half of next year.
And then just quickly, of course, just a reminder that you'd also mentioned that there was some, in terms of the work, it was depot management as well as Braamfontein and other sort of train sectors there. If you could just take us through those as well.
Yes, well, as I said earlier, first of all, it's a new era of rapid rail, and that would, of course, include rapid rail from Johannesburg to Messina, from Johannesburg to Mbombela, and from Johannesburg to eThekwini. we are asking for three kinds of information there. The first kind would be those who want to use the existing rail network, where we can move at speeds of up to 120 kilometers an hour. Then there would be those who would be interested to build new lines where we can move between 120 and 160. And then specifically on the Durban to eThekwini side, the idea of putting in a high-speed rail that could move at 300 kilometers an hour. So we're interested in getting expressions of interest in relation to that. Ticketing. What we all want to tap and go these days. So we know that there are various initiatives within the taxi industry in the Gauteng province, in Gautrain around this. We're inviting any interested party to tell us how they would like to participate in that process being rolled out on the PRASA network, the commercialization of our fiber optic network so that we can get additional revenue for PRASA itself. You mentioned the question of our depots. And there are two depots there. It's the big Braamfontein depot, and I can never say that. What's it? Vulva Hook? Oh yes, something like that. So those two big depots, we want to commercialize those depots, and we'd like those who would be interested in running them for us. And then, of course, there is the question of the future of the Gibela factory, and also opportunities to lease existing PRASA rolling stock. So there are a lot of opportunities for the private sector here. It's not a tender process, it's a request for information, so that in due course PRASA, together with the Development Bank of South Africa that hosts our private sector participation unit, can sift through this information and put out requests for proposals, which would be the start of a formal tendering process.
And very quickly, you did mention that you were taking the cue from Sunrail, looking at sort of a concession in terms of how to roll this out?
Yes, well, I think that there's a lot of concern that we might be privatizing the rail network. And I want to allay those concerns. We're not going to privatize the rail network. We think it's very important that the rail network as well as the ports remain in the hands of the state. It's important because it ensures interoperability. It also ensures that you have adequate maintenance standards. Of course, there are a range of other considerations such as economic transformation and inclusive growth. All of these really mean that the state needs to continue to play a guiding hand. But the fiscus doesn't have the money to build a high-speed rail between Johannesburg and Durban. So we would need to operate on a concession system, or else we would need to operate on a build, operate and transfer mechanism. So, but the idea is that once the concession period or the BOT period comes to an end, that asset would revert to the state.
All right. Thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you very much.
All right, that was Minister of Transport there, Barbara Creecy, just outlining then, of course, the plans that they have as the Transport Department as they, of course, outline their request for information to private sector players to help or play a hand in helping in the recovery of the passenger rail network. But the Minister obviously reiterating that this is not the privatization of the rail network, but, of course, a request for information which is not a tender to the private sector to help in the recovery of passenger rail in South Africa over the next 4 years, to see then 600 million commuter sort of passenger journeys happening by 2030. For now, Alicia, it is back to you in studio.
Thank you so much, Radebe. That is SABC News economics reporter, the Nosipho Radebe, with a wrap, of course, of that transport media briefing. And she was joined by the Transport Minister herself, Ms. Barbara Creecy.